I'm going to show you a demo about highlighting the Watson's element classification capability. This is what you're seeing here is a demo using the Watson business solution called Compare and Comply. The fictitious situation where a person by the name Ernesto is the contract manager of his company, and the company is evaluating a new contract document provided by a supplier, and Ernesto wants to analyze the content of the text of the contract as well as compare it, ensure that it is compliant to the standard formats that the company is used to. So this is the dashboard where he logs into the compare and comply tool. Once he logs in, he will see the various documents uh, that he's analyzing at this point, text. So in this case, this is the document that I want to analyze. This is just, as you can see, it's a test one for the demo purposes. So now I have logged in and I have my documents, and in this case I just have one document. So here is the new contract that I want to analyze. Let's say the Ernesto initially wants to check for the buyer rights for his company and what they are liable to. So in terms of payments and so on. So if I start looking at it and start searching, as buyer, for example, I see that there are 159 matches, and if I type in buyer right, then there's nothing that is matching, and if I do right, then I'm getting 17 matches. So this obviously doesn't really help him much. He's not able to narrow down to the exact sentences or paragraphs talking about the particular buyer rights. So instead, we are going to use the Watson's element classification filtering options. As you can see here, there's a nice little tooling that has been provided for the compare and comply solution. I can click on the party, and in this case it's a buyer, and the nature is I want to check the rights, right? So then I click apply, and it automatically goes and matches, provides all the different rights, and he can check the language in there. He can see what it is talking about, various aspects, right? Now that that is done, I can show you a different aspect of it. Let's say Ernesto wants to now look at from an obligation perspective for let's say payments and terms, right? So he wants to look at what his company is liable to in terms of what kind of obligations that are there for payment terms. So now, as you can see here, it has identified uh, various language in there that specifically talks about obligation from payment and billing purposes. So you can look at that, and the fourth one, for example, it says if the supplier, maybe it is something that he wants to add a comment here, you can mark it as reviewed, as I mentioned earlier, and add a comment that can then be looked at by his collaborators as well. There is another, let's look at another version of, let's say he wants to look at the intellectual property a text in there. So I can go to the intellectual property category, and then when I search for it, it gives me 8 different matches. So when I go in there, let's say Ernesto is looking at this, and then he looks at each of the language, and this particular one uh, you know seems to be pretty standard, but he wants to ensure that he wants to ensure this matches with what the standard template uses. So as you can see here on the top right, there is a button which says compare documents. This will help you to compare with an existing document. So in this case, I'm using a standard template that has been used before, and then when it clicks done, then it takes a few seconds for it to load, but it basically is loading the two documents side by side and trying to compare the two. So let's just give it a few more seconds. Now there it is. So as you can see here, I can say similar sentences and it automatically tries to map to the similar sentences. Uh, I can then, start looking at various aspects, but in this case I want to look at specific to intellectual property. So I know that this is the sentence that I wanted to compare with, and I'll start looking at there are 6 matches here, and I want to see if any of these sentences that are similar to this one, and how they are mapping to the language that we have. What you have on the right hand side is the old template, right? As you can see here, it says template. So as you can see here, it is pretty much the same, except for there is some custom language that they are used to, which is not here. So you can make a comment here saying that, custom language missing, ask the supplier to add the language, for example, and send it back to the supplier, or he could add in a comment saying, this looks pretty standard, even though it is missing some custom language, that is fine, right? So that's the whole idea. So this tooling makes it very easy. You can look at, if I add a comment in here saying missing some custom language, and save it. Now that will be saved, and I can look at these comments, and when someone else, these are some previous comments, and this is the comment that I just added. So as you can see here, you can also check at what all has been reviewed, and whoever logs in, you know, the manager or the legal department will be able to see the same comments and reviewed sentences, and that makes it easier for them to together work together to quickly validate the contracts, and gives them more time to. So this is a quick demo. Thank you.